Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. And my name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. I sort of half forgot the intro as I was doing it.
It's all right. You've only done it 40,000 times, 600 times?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, 601, in fact.
601.
Yeah, something like that.
Yep.
I wouldn't have noticed if you hadn't pointed it out. So,
Oh, cool.
you know, owning up to your mistakes.
Tries and affect your own weaknesses.
Yeah,
it's all good.
made the mistake exist.
I've listened, I've learned, I've acted, just like the Liberal Party. So, speaking of the Liberal Party, this is a news and politics podcast, which I would like to state upfront for legal reasons is purely based on comedy and parody, and we are not allowed to be held illegally responsible for the things that we say on this podcast.
What are you planning to say? Is now immediately what I'm thinking. With a disclaimer like that, just like, oh no, you can just feel the tension in the room just puckering up like all our buttholes. Just
calling Barnaby Joyce a rapist or something, just like something completely.
That's a hell of a for example, Adam.
For example,
which is not what I was about to say. Speaking of buttholes, Alex Antic, Liberal Senator for
South Australia.
Yeah, no. I know he's the senator for South Australia. I was trying to find a diplomatic way of saying borderline dog whistly fucking white supremacist fucking nonsense, but I guess there is no real diplomatic way of saying that.
No.
So, there's.
Yeah, where to begin with this one?
Where to begin?
There's a committee.
There's a committee. Let's start there.
Love a committee.
There's a committee. It's constitutional affairs, and Parliament has these committees. There's one for constitutional affairs. There's the finance one, and yada 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 yada. Basically, senators get on these committees, and their job is to basically grill public servants and their respective ministers as to sort of their
right, scrutinize
scrutinize
the department.
Who's had it too good for too long? Public servants.
Public servants. And generally speaking, it's more so used for, I would say, public
posturing,
entertainment to a certain degree.
Yeah. Senators trying to get clips to put on Facebook, which incidentally is where we saw this clip.
Is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
It's all very much... to be on this committee is more just to be handed, they hand out soap boxes at the door to try and make sure that you are at least sitting on one, if not standing on it, to try and get the aforementioned gotcha Facebook clip of your dreams so that, fuckheads can react to it.
I just need a clip that I can use when running for pre-selection to make sure I don't get our primaried by a more conservative person next time around, which is what I did to someone else. if you're Alex Antic. So this is a committee. Can you tell us a little bit about the committee, Adam, and what they were hoping to achieve with this hearing?
Well, I don't know.
It's a little bit unclear to me.
I'm not 100% sure what their day-to-day is. It's to do with constitutional affairs. But in this case here, obviously, there's a referendum coming up to do with The Voice. Not the TV show, The Voice, Aboriginal or Indigenous voice to Parliament. And so Senator Antic decided to pursue some questioning on that front. I'm assuming there would have been probably other questions or topics that were related to this as well. But the Facebook video...
give us the title of the Facebook video, if you please.
Is warning. Do not ask questions about who will qualify for the Aboriginal voice to Parliament because those questions might be labelled racist.
You can't say anything nowadays.
Can't say anything now.
Can't say anything,
bro. Just
asking questions. Let's hear Alex Antic up to his usual antics, talking some shit in Parliament.
In light of the fact that we're about to embark on a referendum with respect to The Voice, obviously it raises issues of identity, becomes a very critical issue. So I'm wondering, straight off the bat, if someone can tell me who is it that decides who is Aboriginal and how do they do it?
Thank you for that. We've got relevant officer coming to the table. What I would say is that there was a test around Aboriginality that was set out in the Mabo decision, the 3-part test, and that has continued to guide the Commonwealth Government and other governments in terms of the definition of Aboriginality. But I'll just see if Mr. Lewis has anything to add to that.
The only thing I would add to that, Senator, is if I think the Secretary is quite right. There's a legal test that's been recognised in a number of cases. I think it's also the case that the Australian Government might not applies a different approach sometimes in relation to different programs, depending on what's considered to be appropriate. I'll leave it at that.
So do you want to step me through that? And what does that look like? So somebody says, I want to go to Parliament under the Voice, and I'm Aboriginal. How does that work?
Well, if the question is directly in relation to the Voice, I guess I'll just start by saying that the agency that's leading the policy work on the Voice is the National Indigenous Australians Agency. But my understanding is that at this stage there's been a draft constitutional amendment proposed by the Prime Minister, and questions such as who would be eligible to be a member of the Voice or who would participate in choosing members is a matter that would be dealt with in any legislation establishing the Voice or in the establishment of the Voice in some manner.
So that sounds very complicated.
That sounds very complicated because I'm a fucking idiot.
I was like, that sounds very complicated and can't be summed up in a gotcha Facebook.
No. I need a soundbite. So
I want a soundbite of you admitting the process to selecting whether people are Indigenous or not.
If you could just say these words for me: I am a reverse racist fuckhead sent from big government to kick down your doors like the jackbooted thug that I am. No, it's already gone over the 280 character limit. Let's start again.
What, a 3-part test based on dissent, identification, and acceptance by community in broad terms? Is that's basically it?
That's right.
So is that likely to be? I mean, that is the generally accepted and I would say difficult assessment of, it's adopted by the legislation, some of the court decisions.
Mr. Lewis, I think there's 2 parts to the Senator's questions. One is a general question, and then the second part is around the Voice. So I think the general question hasn't been answered yet.
Thank you, Chair. So I think the general question is that what you've outlined, Senator, is a summary of the test that's commonly applied. The question of exactly what the arrangements will be for the Voice is something a matter for the government in consultation with others, and I understand that no decisions have been made about that at this stage.
And so, in relation to the 3-part test, though, how is a person going to ever be able to prove their descent? What is that going to look like? Is it going to look like having one grandparent or a great grandparent that was Aboriginal, and how is that going to be proven in enough to satisfy any constitutional provisions that may be required in order to enter that body?
Well, Senator, again, I would say that the question as to how these matters will be determined in relation to the Voice.
Let's say right now, as of today, you want to establish your lineage as a person. How would that work today?
Well, Senator, as I said, my understanding, and it's not an area within my policy responsibilities or even the department, but I understand that for different purposes, different types of tests are applied. If there is a test that requires an element of dissent, then that might be shown by reference to documents provided by the Aboriginal person in question.
Right at the moment now, we're dealing with agencies including First Nations justice policy and so on and so forth. There has to be somebody in this room. There are about 60 people in this room here, all looking very important. There has to be someone in this room that can answer the question, though, of how someone goes about physically proving or practically proving their lineage for the purpose of whatever it may be. Let's put the voice aside for a moment. What percentage does somebody have to be of Aboriginal descent to be deemed Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander?
Senator, I think I wouldn't be using that type of language, which...
Well, if you're 95% Irish, Scottish, are you going to be 5%? Are you going to be eligible for the voice to Parliament?
I think getting into a conversation about percentage is not appropriate. There is a very long-standing test that's been set out in a High Court decision that everyone takes regard to.
My question is, how does that operate practically? And no one can seem to tell me the answer to that. We haven't even got to the second and third limbs of that test yet. You can understand how there'd be cause for concern when we can't even identify what it is on a practical basis that will identify someone as of a particular ethnic category. That is of concern, I would have thought.
What I would say, and what I think what my colleagues have indicated is this test goes back to the Mabo decision.
Sure. I understand.
It has been utilised.
Senator Antic.
I understand the history of it.
Senator Antic, you will let the Secretary. Senator Antic, please let the Secretary finish her answer.
What I am saying in a practical way that has guided how people can interact with a whole range of Commonwealth programs for decades now. I think officers at the National Indigenous Australians Agency will be able to give you a much more detail of how that happens practically. But that has been the guiding test for decades now.
The Attorney General's Department, the department that is given the responsibility of overseeing legislation in this country, cannot tell me what I would have to do in order to identify as Aboriginal for the purposes of any of these. Just give me one example.
Can't say anything nowadays.
Yeah, ding, 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 ding. As soon
as he said percentage, I was like, oh boy, we just entered the darkest timeline. So
it just felt so gross. Never mind that before he got to that, I just love the Mr. Lewis, I think they said his name was, the bald gentleman who was answering a fair chunk of the question.
Answering very carefully.
Yes, but just like who straight up said, well, that's a matter that isn't in my responsibility, nor even my department.
Yeah, this is not my job.
It's like, I am woefully not qualified to, that's probably not the right phrasing, but like, it is not my area to answer that question, but I'll answer it, I guess. But like, I'm not the guy who knows any of this, so why are you grilling me on it?
That 3-point test, from what I understand, has been in place since the Mabo decision, right? Yeah. So Eddie Mabo, there was a High Court case back in the day, which is talking about Indigenous land rights. And so I guess as part of that, they had to sort of set out some sort of definition as to, Aboriginality. But the fact that the Senator...
I tell you what, he can Google it. It's the first result. I can tell you what it is right now.
Well,
from
he had
the High Court of Australia.
He had the details there. He goes, so you're talking about this 3-point test that refers to XYZ. It's like, okay, so you've Googled it. So you know what's involved. You're just trying to get some public servants to say something, like talk about percentage. Like as soon as you start talking about if you're 95% Irish and 5% this, like, I don't know if you know this, mate, but you're starting to walk down a path that sounds very fucking eugenicsy when we start talking about percentage of race, okay? And the fact that, like, neither here nor there, but like the whole idea of like someone having to prove their Aboriginality as though people, like the implication being that someone who's like quote unquote not Aboriginal is going to like sneak into the voice to Parliament and like have some power over us all because of some like politically correct idea about race is completely fucking nonsense, right? Also, the fact that the idea of percentages and having the whole problem, quote unquote problem, of having to figure out how to define someone as Aboriginal in the first place, the reason that's an issue is because of the stolen generation, is because successive governments over the years abducted Aboriginal children from their families and took them into white homes in order to integrate them into white culture, right? Assimilation, that was the word that was used at the time, in an act of what can only be described as cultural genocide. So like the fact that you look at someone and go, they don't look Aboriginal, why are they still trying to get the benefits of other Aboriginal people? They don't look Aboriginal. Like that whole dynamic is like a very well-trodden like racist trope if you've even like glanced sideways at a history book or just happened to catch Rabbit Proof Fence on 11 p.m. on SBS one night. It's, we're treading over very culturally sensitive ground, and he's just like, I don't fucking understand why we could just, how do you prove you're Aboriginal? Or how do you prove that you're Irish? How do you prove that it doesn't matter if I'm trying to prove that I'm half Italian, half Greek. I'm sure if you did a blood test, you'd find all sorts of DNA sequences from all over the fucking, Middle East and Mediterranean in my blood. No one ever questions it when it's an Italian, but all of a sudden, we're applying the one drop of, African-American blood fucking, slavery eugenics test when it comes to Aboriginality. Like, it's just so fucking crazy and like not even dog whistle racists. But if you look at the comments on this Facebook post, I know it's his Facebook page. So it's like, of course, what should I expect?
Yeah.
Well, it's been shared 601,000. Sorry, it's been shared 6.4 thousand times. Been viewed 601,000 times. And 11,000 comments. Yeah. So it's actually like my nan shared it earlier, like yesterday.
Of course.
Uh-oh.
Because it's done the rounds, right? Like it's fallen in, and then it does for people that don't. And this is my criticism, right? So yes, he's done all those things for those political points. But the problem is that it then starts to then hit these typical sort of...
Can't say anything nowadays. Bloody political correctness. I'm not a racist. I know a black person.
It starts to tick all these boxes where some people will then start to, get into the feeling of, well, that's a reasonable question because, it's the Constitution and that's really important.
One of the top-rated questions. Simon says... a very simple and very relevant question, and all the bench could do was pull the, quote, race card, facepalm emoji, and these people are deciding policy. Heaven help us, grimace face. 1.3 thousand likes. It's just...
It just erodes confidence in the system. And
that's the point
of the fact as well, he's trying to catch them out on something that hasn't been finalized yet.
Which they then, later on in the clip mentioned that it's like, you do realize, like Senator Antic, that if the referendum is successful and then we are discussing what the constitutional change will be, you could be part of the process.
As a lawmaker, you would have something to say about all of this.
Yeah, you'd have an input in the legislation that determines this kind of thing. It's like, there is no... He was just trying to get them to say, like, the threshold will be you have to be at least 51% Aboriginal or something. He was trying to get them to say something like that.
It's just absurd, though. And it's such a dumb gotcha. Because, no, of course, who's going to be drawn on that? Who wants to be at the center of, just me on the fly as someone who's not a policy expert in this area, as a white person sitting on a panel deciding how Aboriginal enough a person needs to be in order to sit on this panel, which we haven't even, to sit on this voice to parliament, which we haven't even agreed as a country is going to exist yet. Like, why? These are all public servants. They're credible people, and people here looking very smart, very important, whatever he said about them, essentially mocking them, saying, very intelligent people, apparently. Nobody can give me
it's a backhanded compliment.
Nobody can give me a 3-word answer to what is an incredibly layered historio-cultural conversation. I don't understand why you can't summarize 250 years of colonialist imperialist history in a 1-word answer. I really don't get it because I'm a fucking idiot.
To summarize some of the other stuff, he's a liberal senator, but
what?
Did I get that right? Actually, is he liberal or did I make that up? Hang on, I'll just make sure I'll check my facts there. But Liberal Party of Australia, yeah. But look, if you look at his Facebook page, 3 hours ago he posted a thing saying the digital ID era is about to be unleashed on the Australian public.
They're coming for you.
The first step in a Chinese Communist Party style social credit system.
Jackbooted
to tell Parliament to reject the digital ID here.
The jackbooted thugs are coming to kick down your doors and give you QR codes. It's fucking government tyranny.
And he's posted a separate... he's actually posted an article here from the Sydney Morning Herald a couple of days ago about how they were trialling this apparently at Mardi Gras or something. I don't know. And then join me live. And then he had a thing. Join me live at Friday at 11 a.m. with Pat Mesiti on prayer and pushback. So there's a sort of through line here, right? So he's
hitting all the right wing shithead talking points, right?
Yeah. So yeah, it's the thing that this kind of stuff that annoys me is that it shoots all this sort of the doubt. It flows seeds of doubt. We haven't even got to the voice yet. We haven't even really had it nailed down.
Yeah, it's dog whistling, like not so subtle white supremacist fucking bullshit, right?
For reference as well, because dog whistling is a dog whistle is the use of coded or suggestive language in political messaging to garner support from a particular group without provoking opposition. Yes. So it's exactly that.
Literally the definition of dog whistling. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see, like, I don't know, like, I don't want to sound too, like, behavior experty or whatever, but, like,
looking at his body language, you can see he's a cuck shithead.
Yeah, well, 100%. Don't even need to be an expert to see that. But,
allegedly.
But he keeps, he keeps referring to his notes, and it just feels like, because whenever he referred to his notes, he'd go back to a very specific way of asking the question of, like, how do we determine that someone is Aboriginal, and just like to really be trying to get the gotcha. And it's like, so he clearly had it written down to be like, this is the right-wing shitheel talking point that I want to be guiding to. And even when he was off the cuff, not saying it, and would then like refer back to it to then change his language. But just what a...
I feel sorry for the public servants because, like, obviously they're not experts in what he's asking. They don't really know the answer. Like, what they should have said was, "We'll take it on notice and get you the information you're after."
Yeah, you're not helping the discussion by drawing it out and trying to speak to him like a person who's engaged in a good faith argument, and you're trying to give them the information because that's obviously not what's happening here. He's done the Googling. He knows what the answer is. He's trying to get you out in a gotcha question. So the more tape you run on you trying to fumble, trying to give an eloquent, complex, layered response. Well, these are bureaucrats. That's what they do. They give long, qualified, multi-paragraph responses to things, and that's not what plays well on Facebook. This whole him getting up and grandstanding like this is an effort for him to capture this footage. I don't quite understand why they're allowed to, like in America, I think there's certain contexts where if you're in the public, sort of like part of some sort of governmental committee or things like that, you're not allowed to use footage from that in campaign commercials in certain contexts. But clearly this is exactly what he's doing here. He's getting this footage to turn around and put on his Facebook or to turn around and run ads on it, raise funding. Hearings. Like but using it in a way to not just garner support from your base, but then to be able to turn around and package it into like neat, little couple of minute out of context videos to then turn around to your base and go, look what a great culture warrior I am. Here's why you should donate $20 to my next campaign for Senate. Like,
well, but I guess he doesn't.
That's what he's doing
in his thing of please donate to my campaign or whatever, or like
it doesn't have to.
I guess it's one of those things of I don't know. I guess the law not catching up to the technology, right?
He's posting content to keep his base engaged. It's like,
you wouldn't call that campaign material, probably in the sense of like what we see in the 6 weeks up to an election.
No, but now it's everything's campaign material. That's the point I'm making. It's just 24/7 campaigning, 100%. Messaging to you, the culture war kind of nonsense to your base in order to, turn them out at the next election, maybe donate money, keep them engaged. It's like, Pedro Pascal fan club, but for politics, keep him engaged.
Let's not draw the internet's daddy into this.
I saw a great interview with him on, I think it was Vanity Fair, him being interviewed on a lie detector machine, Pedro Pascal.
Oh, yeah.
And he said he does, in fact, sometimes look at Pedro Pascal fan club whenever he's feeling down about himself.
Oh.
He's such a dude. I love Pedro Pascal.
He shouldn't feel down on himself. He's perfect.
Yeah.
It
turns out he does think of himself as a sex symbol. They caught him out in a lie there. So
ouch.
he's like, yeah, I am lying. I'm a daddy.
Yeah.
So anything else on Alex Antic?
At the end, we probably missed the punchline of the clip, which in fact, Antic
is when the minister turns up.
Well, it wasn't the minister. I think it was like an assistant or something. The minister is Mark Dreyfus.
Oh, right. Well, I thought a general was there. At least someone, I thought, elected.
Anyway, what was the punchline?
Point scoring.
Well, I mean, the gentleman on the end of the table who sits down basically says, no, look, you're being borderline racist and it's unhelpful what you're trying. The line of questioning you're pursuing is unhelpful. And then to which, the punchline of the headline of the video
I'm just asking questions.
I'm being right. I'm not allowed to ask that question.
Bro, I'm just asking questions, bro. It's just that Tucker Carlson kind of like, I'm a confused puppy. Are you telling me? I don't understand. I'm just asking questions.
Yeah. What do you mean the green M&M can't wear high heels? How am I supposed to jerk it to it now?
How am I supposed to come on my candy if she's not wearing high heels?
What?
It was the whole thing about the M&Ms being sexualized, and then they wanted to change the M&Ms to make them more woke, and Tucker Carlson just fucking had an aneurysm about it.
I don't think they even did it to be like they on the conscious effort to quote unquote be more woke, but it was just more like, we just
that was the allegation.
M&M in the green M&M in sneakers,
as opposed to like cowboy boots
high
or something.
Heels, and they're like, you're defeminizing the female M&M. Oh, we can't have anything anymore. And Tucker Carlson went on a really long crusade over this. It really sounded like he wanted to fuck the green M&M.
Fuck the shit out of that M&M.
And he was a bit put out that he was not attracted to the green M&M anymore. I don't know.
Yeah. Also,
conservatives are weird.
We should just to stipulate what the test actually is, because it's very easily available. It's the I can't say this word.
Extremely Googleable.
I can't say this word properly, so forgive me. But the tripartite. It's a 3-part test.
You could have just gone with 3-part. That's what everyone else did. Yeah.
Requires the demonstration of biological descent from an Indigenous people, together with mutual recognition of the person's membership of the Indigenous people by the person and by the elders or other persons enjoying traditional authority among those people. So they're saying...
So you need to show a family tree, family lineage.
You've got to be able to sort of say, this person, you've got rough family tree,
and you've got to get confirmation. You've got to have confirmation from the community that you are part of that community, which all sounds extremely reasonable.
There is an interesting case, I think, in 2020 where there were a couple of people that weren't born in Australia, I think, and then there was some sort of case around that.
Yeah.
But I just don't understand. How do you not know that talking about race in terms of percentages has an incredibly complex and dark history when it comes to talking about people's percentage of race, and like in the Americas where they said slaves were 2/5 of a human, and like it's just like either and you don't care about that history and you're using it to put the other people in an awkward position, or you're genuinely like an alabaster moron, like who's never cracked a fucking book. Like either way, should you be a senator? Like
it's probably a combination of both. Is that you might have heard it and you don't care, but also at the same time, like, it's like people who can still say the Nazis are the bad guys, but then also be in favor of some really fascist shit. It's like, how are you not putting these two things together? It's like, well, we're not them. Like,
we're not literal Nazis.
We're not them
in 1930s Germany, so therefore we're a different thing. I don't like Alex Antic. And I think, I think it is borderline racist. I think that's a charitable explanation for what he was trying, the things that he was trying to elicit with his questioning.
It's just one of those things where I think a lot of people don't, whether it be Alex Antic or his constituents, a lot of people, believe it or not, don't necessarily know about the context behind some of that questioning and think.
Then Google it. You're a senator. Fucking Google it. Spend 10 minutes on the fucking Google. You spend 10 minutes talking shit out your ass here on the fucking panel. Spend 10 minutes Googling it before you get on the panel. Watch a Kenneth Branagh film. Exercise that muscle. Develop a bit of fucking empathy. And maybe you might understand.
No, he probably did do all that. And he's like, sick. Now I can catch them out in some racist bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. Is it bad faith or is he just a moron? The choice is yours.
It also, there's the concept, I guess, we live in an incredibly multicultural society, and as a globalized world, bloodlines and descent are going to cross increasingly so into the future. The concept of percentages, from a math point of view, if you want to go that way,
unhelpful.
Doesn't work either. Because eventually you're going to get to a point where the fractions are so small by the very nature of time passing and people marrying and God knows what else, that just end up where you're not going to have a 51% or whatever the threshold is that he was trying to push. Or
it's the focus of racial. The idea that race as a concept can be distilled down into like percentages is just like moronic. Like if you look at these sort of 23andMe type things, they'll go, you're 23%, African or 22%, and those percentages are like, if you go back and look at those reports again over time, like as more data becomes available, those shift and change. But it's like the whole point is that like, people that thought they were one race, turns out that they come from a different bloodline completely. But it's like, but I've grown up my entire life as an Italian. Like, how do I deal with the fact that I'm not Italian anymore? It's like, well, race is also like extremely complicated, and it's not a scientifically easily distillable type thing. It's part of culture. It's part of history. It's your community. It's where you come from. Yes, the color of your skin is not like, there is no easily definable, like the borders between all of these cultures, shift and change over time. Yeah. So what's Sicily today was Turkey before, was Greece before that. Like, and so, and those cultures change over time as well. So it's like, it's a very malleable, mushy concept to begin with.
Yeah, but even the concept of being 95% Irish doesn't work either.
It doesn't work because
it doesn't work. You
Irish,
can't be that.
What are we talking? Irish? Are we talking Anglo-Saxon? Are we talking back to the fucking Vikings? Are we talking like the whole idea of race as we sort of currently understand it? Like I'm half Italian, half Greek. Well, that's all very incredibly flawed. And it's much more nuanced and complicated than that. It's like, it is a borderline eugenics-y type idea to think that race can be defined in such neat little boxes and configurations purity, like that. Right? Yeah. It comes back to racial purity. I'm white. I'm racially pure. And then there's like, that single drop of black blood thing that I mentioned, that was like the test that they had in America. That's how they defined if you are partly, if you had one drop of black blood in your ancestry, 3 generations back, you would be considered African American. So it's like, which was a racial test of purity that was like too stringent for the Nazis in the 1930s. Even the Nazis were like, well, that doesn't fucking make any sense because that's going to be basically everyone then. So like the whole idea of it, the idea of trying to distill and quantify race like that by focusing that much on it is racist, is a borderline racist idea. It's so complicated. It can't be fit into neat little boxes like this. The Legal Aliens listening live says, someone said race. Hello, guys. Welcome, Legal Aliens, to the podcast. We're just trying to distill 250 years of colonialist history into a 10-minute discussion on a podcast. So,
we've got 20 minutes now. What are you up to? So
we're 30 minutes in. So I think we solved it. We solved race. You're welcome, Alex Antic.
Yeah. Now, George, whether anyone knows this, might be a regular listener to the show, George has an MBA. George, ring the bell. Let's get the bell out. Let's ring it. He's got the bell.
Yeah.
Oh, did someone say MBA? MBA to the rescue!
I want to say goodbye to my fiance in the future listening to this because she will turn it off.
See you, sweetheart.
Finance chat.
And sometimes George
room and tells me, it's just like, you're talking about finance again.
Sometimes George likes to talk about things that are pretty dull.
No, stay with me.
Stay with you. But anyway, obviously inflation's out of control in Australia. It's going nuts. It's informing interest rate rises. Everyone's feeling the pinch now in terms of mortgage stress and everything else. But there was a report that came out by a left-wing think tank called the Australian Institute.
I don't think you can have like a bunch of socialists working at a think tank. Like, I don't think that works. That we all agree. You know what I mean? Like, I think if you're working at a think tank, we all agree
collectivism is the best way, right?
Yeah, we all agree. No, like, I think if you're working at a think tank, there's like a certain level of institutionalism that you've all sort of like tacitly agreed to. So we'll say centre left. But the Australia Institute is a think tank here in Australia. And basically what they've done is Jim Stanford, who's an economist, has done a report on the inflation that Australia and other Western countries have suffered. Obviously, we've got the same problems in America and the UK and all that sort of stuff. But the Reserve Bank has basically been saying, it's wages are going nuts. We're in a wage price spiral, and that's why we need to increase interest rates to slam fuck everyone in the economy. Just butt fuck the economy a little bit until the unemployment rate starts going up. People start losing their jobs.
Got a better way to put it than that, but sure.
That's why Philip Lowe makes $911,000 a year, and I do this for free. So basically,
the guy who's totally fucking up interest rates also has 911 in his salary.
911. Jet fuel can't melt steel interest rates. So think about it.
That can't be his salary, really, is it?
Yeah, I think it's $911,000. Over 900. It's over 900.
No, that's so weird.
Yeah. Oh, the guy saying like we're all making too much money and making the economy go brr is making $900,000 plus every year. That's a fun truth.
Yeah, that's great.
So you Google that. I'll tell you the story about inflation. So essentially, we've been getting a lot of feedback from various economists saying it's the wage price spiral. Wages are going too high. There's too much money chasing too few goods, and people are spending all this money. It's making inflation go brr. Turns out that Jim Stanford has run this analysis that basically said that's all complete horseshit. In fact, 69%, nice, of additional inflation beyond the RBA's target is related to corporate profits and not wages. Wages account for about 18% of the increase over inflation, whereas corporate profits make up 69% of that inflation.
Well, and you know what? I see absolutely nothing wrong with that because it's 69%.
Nice.
If it was 70%, outrageous. 68, sharpen the guillotine. But 69%, that's the funny number, and it's allowed.
Okay, all right.
So George had to break this down for me a little bit because I was like, hang on, but surely, I can't remember what I said in the chat, but basically I was like, how does that work? Like, does that mean wages have gone up so much that people are then spending much money? But it's to do with the way you measure inflation, right? So you were saying inflation here's
how inflation works. Okay, so you got an apple. Okay, 2022, the apple is worth $1. 2023, the apple is worth $1.10. Inflation has gone up by 10%. Okay, Legal Alien
people
says
that literally go out and test and go with the spreadsheet and just go
literally. So I don't know if they're physically going out into the economy, writing things down on a clipboard. That is definitely how it used to be done. I think there's probably more spreadsheets involved. I think it's hopefully a little bit smarter than that now. Legal Alien says 69%. We can let it slide. So basically what they do is the people go out and measure all the prices of all the stuff in the economy, and they measure it up and say, okay, it was the prices for this stuff was $1 last year. It's $1.10 this year. Inflation is 10%. And that's fine. There's different measures of inflation. There's core inflation and other kinds of inflation. So depending on which sector you might go, fuel's had a 30% inflation year on year, whereas food and vegetables, it's only been, 7%. So you can break it down into subcategories. Inflation basically is taking the prices of everything in the economy and measuring the rate of increase.
The average, yeah.
Yeah. So but the idea that it's just too much money chasing too few goods and people have too much money because there's been too many wage increases is basically, that's not what's happened. The increases have doubled. The increase in price, rather, is over more than double what the increase in wages have been over this period. So it's not that there's too much money sloshing around in, chasing the same amount of goods in the economy, and that's why the prices of everything have gone up. The prices have gone up because of price gouging. Because we live in an economy where there's oligopolies. They're not monopolies, but there's several companies that own all the stuff. And basically, they've been taking advantage of this inflation environment and going, oh, well, our inputs have increased by, say, 10%. We're going to increase our prices by 20% because people are expecting inflation and they haven't got a choice. You need to buy fuel. You need to buy food.
We're trying to I think sort of what you can talk about there is people are pricing in expected inflation, right?
Companies specifically
Companies,
are expecting that the public knows that there's inflation, and so they're jacking up prices. And then people look at the prices and go, "That's inflation. It's food. I need to put food in my body in order to live. I need to put fuel in my car in order to drive. I don't have a choice. I just need to pay it." And so it's not that there's all of this extra money and it's trying to get drained out of the system with these higher interest rates. It's just that, like, we don't have a choice. So it's just like a larger portion of our paychecks are just going to these everyday essentials because we don't have a choice because of corporate profiteering. Like,
I guess an example of that it's been in the news this week is that like Qantas had a $5 billion or is expecting
$1 billion.
$1 billion profit.
Oh,
yeah.
profit. Was it $5 billion or $1 billion?
No,
$1 billion. No, $5 billion was Commonwealth Bank that's expecting a $5 billion profit.
Right.
which
Sorry,
are
just getting my
record profits.
billions mixed up between businesses.
but
What's
I
a couple of billion between friends?
I just love that with Qantas because it's just like Qantas, they had a $400,000 loss or something, like a $500 million. That's $500,000. Sorry, 400 million loss, $500 million loss or something the year before. But they're going to get $1 billion profit this year. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I could get $1 billion profit as well if I cut all my costs and jacked up the prices of all my flights and I don't know, got laid off my workforce and just did all this sort of shit. Any company can make $1 billion.
No, Tom. It's called
cut everything.
Management. The more you know, it's management. It's not that fuel, jet fuel prices have come down and the number of flights going out is decreased, and we're just cutting staff and subcontracting out left and right for cheap rates, and we've jacked up our prices to extort people that need to travel because they need to travel for work or family or for whatever reason. That's good management, Tom. And basically what the free marketeers would argue is that this is exactly what people like Milton Friedman said that companies should do. Okay, like companies at all times should be
beholden to their shareholders, right?
Exactly right. They're responsible to their shareholders to generate maximum value. And so you should always be maximally exploiting your customers in order to generate the most shareholder value for them. So it's about the ability to pay. Okay, do you have the ability to pay these extortionate sky high prices? Well, then that's what we're gonna take out from you. The problem is that that whole idea of the free market is predicated on having a choice. If I don't like this airplane, this airline service, I'll choose another airline service that has cheaper flights, and so prices will naturally moderate. But the thing is, when you've got 4 banks, when you've got like 3 major airlines, when you've got 2 supermarket chains, in reality, like 1.5 hardware chains, like the industries in Australia are incredibly consolidated around these kinds of industries. So it's like, yeah, you don't have a choice. You have to buy petrol at vendor A or vendor B, and you don't have a choice because you need to drive to work because that's how you get to work. So it's like, it's not about you don't have a choice. There's no competitiveness in the market because no matter which way you go, you're getting stooged. So
I mean, there is an element. I can say that from my personal experience that like there is part of it is because of that, but like there is at a base level, there is a supply and demand issue with things like labor and supply lines, right?
Yeah, but labor is 3.8% more expensive than it used to be, but the prices are 30% more than they used to be. You understand what I'm saying? So what they're doing is they're not just covering the difference and going, oh, the labor's a little bit more expensive, I'm just going to pass that on to the consumer. They're using that as an opportunity to create additional profits. And that's where the vast majority of this inflation is coming from. The dramatic expansion of business profits, taking gross corporate profits to an almost 30% of national GDP, the highest in history, has been mostly unremarked on by the RBA and other macroeconomic policymakers. They're focusing on wages and price. But business profits make up 30% of national GDP. That means 30% of anything changing hands anywhere in this economy is corporate profits. So I mean, it's not just...
Depends on the sector, because like I know the construction sector is not necessarily like that, but there are...
But what happens in this situation is that smaller operators get pushed out. This is how consolidation happens. And this is where the economics of the free market don't really quite make sense. This is where some sort of regulation needs to come and step in. Is that because things are so consolidated, the companies that win the most out of that are the largest companies, because then they gobble up all the smaller companies that can't be competitive. And so which invites increasing consolidation into a duopoly or in some cases a monopoly. And that's got nothing to do with like a less competitive market becomes inherently less competitive as time goes on, unless someone comes in and breaks some of these companies up. And this is where the ACCC...
That's partly why prior to the pandemic, like, I guess, you know, in Australia, like a lot of stuff was from overseas, right? Because it's to be able to find a cheaper price. Like, you get to a point where there's like, you can't go much lower than what, you know, if you're a business trying to sort of source things, you end up using international manufacturers, supply chains, whatever else, which sort of that's how you start to sort of overcapitalize in certain areas, and then there isn't any competition because everything's getting done in Bangladesh.
Yeah, it's all coming from the same factory.
Yeah,
in some instances. Legal Aliens is writing in, inflation is outrageous here in the States. Many people were already barely getting by. Now it feels like a bubble is building and people will get eaten by new debts and falling wages. It's crazy. Yeah, that's how it feels here as well. I mean, traditionally in Australia, we've had a fairly high standard of living and decent wages, but you're starting to see situations where with rising interest rates, we're going to start seeing distressed selling, people not being able to afford to pay their mortgage anymore and having to sell their houses. And let me tell you, when that housing bubble pops here in Australia, it's going to pop hard. It's going to be really bad for a lot of people because there's so many jobs tied into the housing industry.
It's going to be tricky.
It's going to be very fucked.
Like as a person who works in the property sector, I don't want to see distress selling. As a millennial who also wants to buy their first home,
here's the thing: you get distressed selling.
Prices to drop a little bit.
Millennials are going, "Oh, it's good. You know, it might not be so bad. Housing prices will drop." And it's like, yeah, but if the whole system's in financial crisis and interest rates are high, your borrowing capacity goes down. Even if a property goes from $1 million to $800,000, your borrowing capacity has gone from $700,000 to $400,000. You still can't afford it.
Still in the same spot.
You're still in the same spot. Like that's what's so fucked about it.
It's almost like we have to completely rethink housing.
Housing in Australia in most parts of the world, in terms of Western developed economies, it's a system which is broken, really.
Absolutely fine.
I just like the idea from having looked at this report. It makes me feel better going, okay, it's not that a bunch of people have got extra money in their pockets and they're just spending willy-nilly on shit they don't need, and that's driving up inflation. Like, that really isn't what's happening here. Like, because it makes me feel kind of crazy because it feels like other people maybe are getting ahead. And for me, you know, interest rates are going up, my mortgage is going up, things are getting harder.
Crazy bullshit.
Well, it's like, where are all these people getting all of this money that they're apparently spending and driving inflation up? It's like
out to the eyeballs.
Because I know I'm feeling squeezed. You know, my mortgage is up basically 50% from where it was this time last year in terms of the monthly money that's going out every month. Like, you know, the cost of the grocery shop is a good, you know, I want to say 20-30% more than it used to be. Like, there's all these areas where shit is more expensive, but I'm not making 20-30% more. So the amount of money that's left over just keeps shrinking and shrinking. So it's like, is it just me? Am I crazy? Or it's like, no, it's actually not. You're not crazy. This is happening to everyone. And the people are making off like bandits. So the people, you know, the executives of these corporations making gargantuan corporate profits. Like,
there are issues. Like,
it was capitalism all along.
I want to be really clear that, like, there are definitely situations, like, I'll use to use construction because this is my background, but the concept of like frames, right? There was a timber shortage during the pandemic. Frame being a wooden part of a house.
Yeah.
Timber shortage during the pandemic, and then there was a labor shortage because people who were working, you know, in those jobs left. And then basically there's a timber shortage, and then the timber supply started to come back online, but then there was no one to build it. And there's still, to this day, there is a labor shortage in the construction sector. So what's happening is, you know, if you're a chippy, if you're a carpenter, you get to go, oh yeah, I could do your job for you, but I'm going to charge, as you said, X amount. So at the base labor level, some of these sort of trades are charging, you know, crazy amounts, which therefore means that the people employing them, the people that are employing these contractors, then have to pay more, which then ends up in the customer. And then what
But it's one thing. It's one thing passing it on. It's another thing using that environment as an excuse to crank your profits, which is what's happening broadly across the economy.
The thing is, I think a lot of people are going, or businesses are going, well, if we keep going in this direction, we have to be here to hit our target. So we're going to put it up 23%. The question being is, once some of the supply side issues start to resolve, and they will resolve eventually.
Well, a lot of them have resolved. This is the thing. It's like we're not actually.
Are you going to lower your prices again?
No, exactly right. No, they want to keep those corporate profits up. Like we said before, Commonwealth Bank has announced a $5 billion profit. Okay, now they're not capturing new markets, getting new clients, any of this. Well,
Cash ratio's gone up, right?
No more than just recently. No more than they have been prior to the pandemic. They haven't been landing, massive new contracts, and that's what's to explain these, this new record $5 billion profit. What's happened is they're just managing the money. So interest rates go up, but the savings rates that they pay you, the consumer, for your deposits, they go up, but they go up really slowly over time. And I don't know how it isn't price fixing if all the four major banks all decide to slowly. So the deposit rate is when you put money in the bank, you get an interest rate back. You get 1% back, okay, every month. And that's to encourage you to give the banks money to deposit, and then they can turn around and do other stuff, deploy it into the economy, get a return on it. That's how they make their money. Yeah. But if interest rates go up and they apply those interest rates from the Reserve Bank straight away, which they do, because why would they just lose a bunch of money? Your interest rate goes from 3.5%, well, whatever it is, 4.5% to 4.75%. But your savings rate, that might come up, but it's going to take, they're going to wait a couple of months until they absolutely have to raise it. So that gap.
A couple of weeks has been sort of the thing that
but the housing interest rates shoot up, but the deposit rates sort of feather up slowly over time. And that gap between, because they could easily raise those two rates at the exact same time and in tandem. Your mortgage rate goes up, done, okay, and your deposit rate goes up at the same time, done. They don't do that. The reason why is because they make money off the middle. That money in between,
they can bank. Yeah,
they just bank it. And so it's not because they've done anything brilliant with their business model that they've declared a $5 billion profit. They're just taking money from you more with one hand and then giving it back to you much slowly with the other hand.
Yeah, it's like when I look at some of these rates, so like ING, I'm with ING. ING's, they're probably one of the more progressive savings account. That's part of their, they were in the Barefoot Investor recommended them. So I guess they've got a lot of business off that. So they need to sort of keep that brand identity up. They went from,
that was the thing is they sort of pay slightly higher interest rates than the rest of the industry. That's their sort of branding.
Yeah, so it got down to 1.6, and now I think it's at 4.8. So over the last, I don't know, what's that? When did interest rates start going up? 8 months ago. So it's gone up 3.2%, something like that. So, but if you go to CBA, I'm just trying to find the data on that, but
we're also talking
that was down to 0.0% something.
We're talking about a situation where the inflation rate's something like 7.8%. By the end of 2022. So it's that 4 point whatever percent is fine. But, say your interest rate is 4% and inflation is 7%. Well, you've actually gone backwards 3%. Your money now is worth 3% less than it was a year ago. So even those you go, oh, the cash rate, the deposit rate is 4.6%. How good is that? It's well, it's actually not that good at all. You're actually earning negative money at 4. It's
also predicated on the concept of actually having a balance there in the first place to actually earn the interest on it as well.
Yeah,
if you've got $500 in your bank account at any given time, interest is worth nothing to you because you're living month to month.
And the banks have also, and they know this. They know it's hard and annoying to change. That's why they make these nice apps. It's a nice app experience. It's all well integrated into the other services I use. If I move to this other bank, I'm going to have to set it all up again. I got to change. I got to send a new form to my employer to pay me in a different bank. It's like $15 over the year if I go with this bank or the other bank. It's not worth changing. I'll just stay where I am. And they know that and they capitalize on that. So you stay where you are. Banking is one industry that is weirdly sticky with its customers. Any other industry, people go, oh, there's a slightly better price over here. Go fuck yourself. But with banking, they're like, I got a Dolomite savings account as a kid. I'll stay with CommBank for the rest of my life.
I don't want to feel that personally attacked, George. Jesus Christ.
But that's why they did those Dolomite accounts back in the day. They're like, we're teaching you how to save so you can learn about money and stay a Commonwealth Bank customer for the rest of your fucking life, you fucking pleb. Give us your fucking money, you cunt. Like that's part of the plan. It's a marketing ploy because they know once you're in, a lot of people just set it and forget it. They don't compare on this sort of stuff like they do other services. Meanwhile, Netflix goes up 5%. People are like, I'm never signing up for Netflix again. This is fucked. But meanwhile, they'll drop thousands of dollars a year on higher interest rates on their mortgage because can't be bothered refinancing. It's too hard.
It's fun. It'll be interesting to see the next 6 months to see sort of how it all ends up.
I just hope we don't get pushed into an economy where the whole idea of rising interest rates is basically to make the populace, or make homeowners, I should say, so poor that like they physically can't afford to buy things, and then hopefully the prices come down. It's like maybe you'll even start cutting back on essentials. I guess that's the hope. Is like maybe you just put $20 of fuel in the car rather than filling up a full tank. I don't know what maybe I'll go halfway to work and then I'll come back. I don't know what they're expecting is how that's going to really help, especially when the drivers of all of this inflation aren't wage-based. And targeting homeowners is just not a good, like it's not an equitable, smart way of doing it either. Like John Maynard Keynes back in the 30s or something proposed this idea was basically like enforced savings. So kind of like a superannuation scheme where it's like when inflation goes up, we increase your super rate. Okay. And when inflation goes down, we decrease your super rate. Maybe we give you access to some of that money back again. So it's like enforced savings, but it can be used to take steam out of the economy when necessary or give it a bit of stimulus when things aren't going well. And that would apply evenly across the economy. You could scale it up so it affects high wage earners the most and low wage earners the least. You could, even if it was like a progressive tax, then you could take some of that money and then use it to help supplement the living situations of the very poor, make sure people don't become destitute. And it would affect everyone rather than homeowners. Homeowners are a smaller portion of the economy now than they've ever been because of these ludicrous housing prices. So we're just squeezing homeowners, which are 65% of the population when it used to be, in the 70s. We're squeezing a smaller and smaller subset of people, hoping that reducing their spending is going to benefit everyone else. And hopefully we don't crash the economy on the way down. It just seems like not a good plan.
What do? Do you tax the companies more, but then they just pass those taxes on?
Super profits tax. No, profits. Because here's the thing, is that if you're doing it based on profitability, then it's entirely reliant on how much profit they're declaring, right? So not just a regular, sort of like tax rate, where it's like, so say it's a super profits tax. You declare more than $1 billion in profits, and we're going to take, rather than 30% or whatever it is, we're going to take 40% or 50%. And then you can use that money and deploy that into areas of the economy where people are struggling with cost of living crisis. And it only works if they're declaring what a reasonable person would describe as an excess rate of profit, right? Yeah. If you're just doing it if you're increasing your prices to keep up with your input costs and you're maintaining the same percentage, your same margins of profitability, well, then your profits aren't going to increase. Your profit's going to be the same, right?
Yeah. It's you lost me a profit, to be honest. I'm started to switch off. But yeah, I mean, suffice to say, it's a situation that, I think we said last night that we've been through several economic cycles in the space of like
a couple of years. Yeah, that's what it feels like.
It's a really weird spot to be in. We've been in, these things normally play out over a decade, and it's like we're sitting here just sort of like, just like we're taking it like champs, working through it. So,
well, there were 8-9 rate rises last year in the space of a year after they said rate rises wouldn't start happening until 2024. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. It just feels like regular people are getting fucking squeezed, and the RBA doesn't really give a shit. They're like, just keep turning the screws. You got to make them hurt. Got to get that inflation down.
Philip Lowe said
Otherwise,
his last sort of press conference briefing thing that he did. It was
Mm.
like, yeah, there's still capacity for us to stop people spending. We're like, okay.
I don't know whose capacity. Not my capacity, certainly.
So yeah. Now, Mardi Gras happened. Is it this weekend?
Yeah, just
Saturday?
recently. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just the
Yeah.
other night.
Yeah.
Last
Big
night, I think even.
big Pride Festival, Sydney. It's not out of the world. Big draw card for Sydney. But a few things happened, which is sort of interesting, I guess. Particularly being that the PM, for the first time in Australian history, marched in Mardi Gras alongside others. I think with Penny Wong, from memory.
Now,
It
for
is
the record, it's not the first time that Albo has marched
no.
in Mardi Gras. It's just the first time or it's not the first time that someone who has then been Prime Minister has marched in Mardi Gras, but it's the first time someone, while they are Prime Minister,
Mm.
marched in the Mardi Gras march.
Yeah, I think Albo said he'd been attending them since 1983.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so I saw that a little bit of that video grab where he was talking to the reporter there, and I was like, oh, isn't that just nice that we have a prime minister of the country who's just, I don't know, just a good human being doing a good thing. And it's not like making them do the moral right thing as an exercise in pulling teeth. It's just kind of like...
I don't know, George. Barnaby Joyce had a few things to say about it. And,
okay, well, yeah, I mean...
Well, he's criticised him because he should have been in Alice Springs. Should have been in Alice Springs.
Anytime...
Crime surge. Which there is a youth crime surge in Alice Springs.
Okay, but he's
the Prime
not...
Minister should have been there.
But he's not the Sheriff of Alice Springs. He's the Prime Minister of Australia. So, that is a local, very much a local and state government issue. And I think if there's any support that the federal government can give for that situation, I'm sure he'd be happy to give it. But it's very much not his responsibility, a local crime issue in a particular district, in a particular part of the country.
He'd already been to Alice Springs.
He's been to Alice Springs.
He was there the other week.
You got to love bastion of morality onto his second family, Barnaby Joyce, talking, lecturing other people about what they should be doing.
Yeah, generally, if Barnaby Joyce has some critical words to say about what you're doing, you're probably doing something right.
It's just like a normal human thing to be like, yeah, love is love, and we should support our brothers and sisters because we live in a community and these people are part of our community and we should appreciate them. It's like, what a refreshing change from, the quasi, alt-right, far-right conservative religious kind of nonsense we've been dealing with for the last 9 years. It's just like such a small, simple act, but I was like, yeah, good. That's good.
The other thing that happened at Mardi Gras was Lidia Thorpe stopped the parade. And I haven't really looked into this story much more than that, but I think you guys have. So what exactly happened, Tom?
Oh, well, from what I saw of it, Lidia Thorpe was in the march somewhere and then staged a protest by lying down in front of the parade float for the police. So as the police float had to stop, I think there was some yelling of like "fuck the police" from her and things like that,
Cool.
and then she was moved on. So yeah, that's what happened. And I know George ain't thrilled about it, but good on her, I think, in that sense, because fuck the police's presence in Pride. Anything to do with Pride stuff.
Oh, what? There aren't gay police?
Well, no, sure there are gay police, but the Pride marches started, as then Lidia Thorpe points out in her follow-up sort of stuff, began as a fuck you to police brutality against gay people.
Okay, so as someone who wants to find a solution to police abuse of people of color and LGBTQ people and others, is it best to make enemies of them or maybe bring them into the tent and include them and form relationships with them?
Oh, right. So the I'm going to straw man this, but fuck it. So the Auschwitz prisoners should have said, Nazis,
Fuck you.
come in, have
What a
cup of
fucking
tea.
bullshit straw man,
Let's
Tom.
bring you
Fuck
in.
you.
Let's bring you in.
What
Let's
a
bring 'em
bullshit.
in.
No,
Let's bring our oppressors in.
I
Let's
appreciate.
make mates of our oppressors.
I totally appreciate that there is a complicated history between the LGBTQ plus community and the police, right?
Yeah.
And there have been instances of brutality, and one need only Google Stonewall in order to find, examples
100%.
of really problematic interactions between those two communities. However, at the stage that we're at now, where we've got the police symbolically joining the protest, being a part of it, connecting with the community over this shared identity around LGBTQ issues, surely that is a better state of affairs than the police being, the brutal opposition that don't want any part of it and try and stamp it down. Like, surely that is having a relationship with the police and becoming a closer community. Isn't that what Pride's all about? Is about connecting people and bringing them all together? Like, you you can't participate because you're police? Well, there's gay police too.
Yeah, they
have identities. You can't negate that. Like,
oh yeah, and that's I guess I don't know. I'm not a queer person, so I can't speak to their moral quandary. But to be like, oh, you're a police officer, yet with all that history, why would you do that?
What percentage police are you, Tom?
what percentage?
Oh, well, yeah, that
If
too.
you go back into your lineage, what's I need the percentage of policemen that runs in your veins.
I've seen many people protesting the idea of police taking part in pride marches around the world. They don't want them there, and it's their community. They don't want them.
I don't think that you can say that with like a definite say, like everyone in the LGBT community doesn't want them there. I don't think that's
surely not. But
there's like, I'm sure there's people on one side of the issue and people on the other side of the issue. Like, it makes sense to me to have as many different sectors of the community. If people, Catholic priests want to get up there in the Pride March and say, we support gay people, and then we as a community can all coalesce around this shared agreement that gay people are okay and deserve a place in our society, I think that's good. Like, surely...
Is it good that maybe, if people like Lydia give us gentle reminders every so often about it.
If Lydia reminds us that she needs to be in the fucking news cycle again, because there's been an entire news cycle that hasn't centered around Lidia Thorpe. Yeah. So she thought, I need to be on the front page of the fucking paper again.
It seems more like your axe to grind here is that it's Lidia Thorpe that did it.
I don't like Lidia Thorpe. I'm saying
that is apparent.
I'm putting a stake in the ground. I don't think it's just like, it's Pride. How can I make it about me?
There was
it's not about you, Lydia. Not everything needs to be about you, mate.
I would argue she didn't make it about herself, but I know.
Yeah, that's why we're saying her name on a fucking podcast. Is because it's not about Lydia Thorpe.
Or is it just Yahoo.com making it about Lydia Thorpe?
Well, it's ABC and BBC. It reached the BBC. This is an international news story now.
Yeah, she's the one who did the thing, but I don't know. I think it's I think it's a bit messed up to say that because she's the one who did the thing that's her making it about herself. I saw plenty of the promo of Albo walking around in the march. Is that making it all about him? No, he's the one doing the good thing?
Because
look at me,
it's about promoting the cause that they're there to promote. We're here. It's Pride.
Sorry, it's about promoting the cause.
It's about promoting.
Did I hear that right?
It's about promoting the cause. The event is a Pride march, okay, and he's there to lend his support to LGBTQ plus Pride, okay? Anthony Albanese didn't go there and say, actually, it's about crime in Alice Springs. I know you guys are happy here on your float, but we need to talk about what I want to talk about and make it all about me. No, he was there in service of the LGBTQ community. Lydia Thorpe was there in service of herself.
There is a long history of police brutality, particularly to queer people of colour, that was also the start of these marches. That's the history. Like, we talked about fucking what's-his-face. Antic should have Googled some shit before we talked about this. That's what I was doing before we got onto here. That's the history of, like, Pride marches.
Stopping an entire Pride march because you want to lie in the middle of the street and make a spectacle of yourself in order for people to talk about you I think it's
and the issue. Like, we're talking about her.
Every single person in that crowd, could jump in front of that fucking float and make it about whatever pet issue they care about. I'm going to talk about animal rights, and all of a sudden the float is bumping over bodies like it's The Walking Dead, trying to get through. We're here for pride. That's the thing we're talking about today. We can also talk about Indigenous rights. We can also, but that's a different day. That is a separate day. Today is for LGBTQ.
Is this just not the quandary of free speech where people can say anything they want?
Oh, she's free to do it, and they're free to move her on, and I'm free to call her a fuckhead, a narcissistic shitlord.
Except that the fact that you can't say that those two issues, that they're of like completely different days and things, because there are Indigenous people who are queer and there are queer people
Don't you bust out intersectionality on me, Tom, like I haven't done my fucking reading. Okay, sorry. You say something, Adam. You say something.
Okay, so firstly, calm the fuck down.
You calm the fuck down.
You know you calm the fuck down because you're yelling. But secondly, do we know exactly what she was trying to? Has she said what she was trying to achieve by doing it?
Or about police.
Yeah. Afterwards, talking about how the early stages of Pride were protests towards police violence to queer people. It was often led by a lot of queer people of colour. And that there's like no cops should be in Pride because they're the oppressors. That's what started this movement. I think she's right. I have no horse in the race in that sense, but I think she's right.
So this is a tweet that Senator Lidia Thorpe, she's begging us not to read it out on the podcast because she loves just completely being humble. But she said, Black and brown trans women started the first Pride March as a protest against police violence. Today, we still face violence from police. Proud to have joined the Pride in Protest float in Sydney to say #no pride in genocide, #no pride in prisons, and #no cops in Pride. It feels very exclusionary. Like, I understand the point that she's making. Police brutality is bad. I'm with you up until that point, Lydia. But then to turn around and say no cops in Pride, how is that not exactly the same kind of exclusionary bullshit that led us up to this point? The whole point of Pride is inclusivity, right? Welcoming of all of the different peoples and cultures and groups in the celebration of the queer identity.
Them for their entire lives isn't welcome. But until they make changes, George. Making changes. Stop the rage.
Yeah, all we need is perfect police.
Hyenas here, where they broke the arm of a queer man who was terrified by the fact that police just kicked the door in the middle of the night. Like, all the police brutality that still happens to queer people and queer people of colour.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen. But again, how do you expect to resolve that if the response is kick them out and literally saying, and this is a quote from Lidia Thorpe, fuck the police? That is not the way. No cops in
Pride till you fucking adult up.
No, because that's not the way you actually do. This is what we were saying the other week about Lydia, because we were talking about her so often because she hates being in the news, is that this is an activist point of view. This is not like a realpolitik legislator point of view where
she's not in Parliament at the moment, is she? At Mardi Gras?
The way you get things done, the way you affect real change in the world is not by alienating entire groups of people and saying you're not welcome here and go fuck yourself. The way you get things done and create positive change is by working together. Okay? There is a place for protest, and there is also a place for welcoming and inclusivity, even if you don't agree 100% on every single fucking issue.
The thing with
I'm going to mute Tom, I swear to God.
Oh, calm down, mate. Jesus Christ.
Doesn't like having his voice silenced, does he?
No. I didn't hang up when you had boring finance chat.
Oh, you bitch. You goddamn bitch.
The thing you remember with Lidia Thorpe, as you said, is that she is effectively an activist politician, right? So for whether that's ethical or not, we can put that aside. But the point is that's her primary focus. That's pretty much who she's been since she was young. She's always been an activist. So she's always going to take a fairly particular view about something, and she's like, that's the way she works. Now, whether or not the thing that she has achieved what she set out to do, which is potentially to shine a light on and remind people that there is a problematic history there. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The question being is, in terms of the Overton window, it's like people saying it's the whole the same thing. You could tie it to the whole fuck the police argument or defund the police in the US, right? It's not a realistic sort of movement, although it does start to raise questions and shine light on things, and it does start to potentially, create a conversation.
I'd call it unrealistic.
Okay. And here's the other side of that, is that since the defund the police, those protests happened in the wake of the George Floyd murder. What's happened is Republicans have used that phraseology as a cudgel to hit Democrats. And so you don't want to vote Democrats. Democrats want to defund the police. And a bunch of middle of the road voters look at that and they go, well, that's fucking crazy. I guess I'll vote Republican. So if we're talking about affecting realpolitik changes on the ground, there are things that are helpful from an activism standpoint, and there are things that are actively unhelpful in making the kind of incremental change that we need to make in order to make things better.
But I've used this example before, like the Greens movement in Tasmania is a good example where, there have been some pretty extreme protests in Tasmania about anti-logging. And by large, a lot of those did push people, certain types of people, it pushed them further away from the Green movement because they saw them as being radicals, basically. Yeah. But over time, that movement that Bob Brown started and the guys chanting himself to trees, that has started to change the way people view things in terms of the forestry industry in Tasmania, and not just in Tasmania, but across the country as well. So I guess the point being is there's got to be someone. In this case here, it's Lidia Thorpe who's doing it. And, I guess the question I have is, should a senator for parliament necessarily be throwing herself in front of
All right, that's fine. But where's your legislation? Where's your co-sponsored legislation that you've negotiated, with people in the lower house, to sponsor some legislation to make these changes to address these issues that you're highlighting? Where's the, because legislating is a collaborative process. Okay, it is about, if you want to affect positive change from a legislation standpoint, which I would argue is the only real way that you make change in society, that is an effort that it's all about collaboration and cohesion. It's about winning people over to your side and getting them to vote with you and march with you and do these things to affect real change in the form of legislation.
So
how do you do that if you're pissing everyone off?
But by the same token, you're not necessarily pissing everyone off.
We're not pissing Tom off, obviously.
We've started a conversation.
And at first, when I saw it happen, I was a bit like, oh, God, what now? And then I looked into it a bit more and was like, good point.
Yeah.
So there we go.
The problem is with this is that in some ways, the story has been not about maybe we should reality check the fact that police are in the parade. The conversation has been Lydia Thorpe threw herself in front of the float.
Yeah, it has been the Indigenous woman's been annoying again, is what.
No, it's got nothing to do with her being Indigenous.
All those headlines have been like Lydia Thorpe's being annoying again. I'm like, yeah, because no one actually looked at the point.
Yeah, but here's the thing: is that after a while, though, when you are a serial activist, some people will start to look at you with.
To me, this is the other side of the coin of Alex Antic. I really do think that, where it's like you are grandstanding to make yourself look good, and I don't know, maybe get donations and run ads and make yourself look good for the next political cycle. It's not about affecting real change, because if it was about that, you'd be in the trenches drafting legislation.
Yeah, but she would see that this is her purpose, right? She would see that what she is doing is having an effect, because otherwise, why would you do it? So, you could argue, maybe there is
I think it's self-interest. I think it's a bit of narcissism. She likes being in the news, and I think there's a political advantage to being the squeakiest wheel in the room, and attracting donations, attention. I really do think it is the flip side of what Alex Antic is doing, and you'll notice neither of them are in the trenches, quietly making change for the better on either of these issues.
But then is that just society where you have people on either end of the spectrum, and then really where the meat gets done is in the middle? But
The consensus.
they all influence each other, right? It's like you can't have one without the other.
One of them's grandstanding against police violence. The other one's grandstanding for eugenics. I wouldn't say that.
But for whom are they grandstanding? Who is the beneficiary of the grandstanding? Because I don't see a single less Indigenous death in custody as a result of her doing this. Whilst I might agree with her on the substance of what she's saying, like there's no what you are doing. It's one thing to do if you're a protester. If you're a kid and you have no power. It's one thing to protest, to throw a can of soup on the painting, right? But you have power. You have the ability to directly affect the change that you're calling out for. So where are you where are you exercising this power? Well, you're doing the showy thing. You're not doing the thing that would actually help to benefit the thing that you say that you want to help.
Well,
I've not seen any evidence of it.
Do you start a conversation
Where's the bill?
By doing something pretty radical and then garner support?
We'll see how many major legislative accomplishments she has by the end of her term. And I'm guessing I'm going to make a quick prediction now. I'm going to place a small bet and say it's fucking zero.
Yeah, but a senator never has legislative accomplishments. Like they are a cog in a larger machine.
Well, then why go independent?
Well, I mean,
if you don't get to make your own decisions about those things.
So is she, I guess, can still have more of her the very public opinions that she's been throwing around without any kind of the party room politics.
I don't care what your opinions are. What I care is when you have power, what do you do with that power? Do you make people's lives better with your power or don't you? Now, you're an independent senator, okay, in a crossbench where the government needs to deal with you individually to get legislation through. Yeah. She has a massive amount of power, okay, because she's not voting in a voting block with Labor and the Greens anymore. She's now an independent. She gets her say specifically on any piece of legislation that passes through the parliament. That is a monumental amount of power. Okay, so I don't buy for the example that she's just a massive cog in a big, heartless, cold machine and there's nothing she could possibly do about it. She is a key vote in the crossbench of the Senate. What do you do with that power? That's what I care about. You can say whatever you want on Twitter. Do you make people's lives better? That's the important thing. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I think we said this a couple of weeks ago, but I just think it'll be interesting to see how she learns and grows and how she starts to handle, I guess, that dual role as an activist and as a politician, and how, where she'll be in 3 years, basically.
I think we're just going to see more of this. I think it's literally just going to be this.
I feel like this is too, you'll burn yourself out after a while doing all this. You're trying to, do you know what I mean? You get to a point where you start to, you as an individual, I'm sure this, she would have had to have planned all that and, unless it's something that's very easy for her, but that would have stressed me out. I wouldn't have been able to focus on anything for the whole week. But yeah, I don't know. It's I've got as I think we said the other day, I've got too much social anxiety to do anything that crazy.
Yeah, no, I haven't got the balls to do that sort of stuff anymore. Tom, I want to give you a chance to talk because I feel like you're kind of regarding me with a kind of disappointed expression. I was talking over you before, so I want you to have your say on this.
Oh well, no, I don't have a fully formed, coherent thought all over sort of everything we were just discussing then. But I don't know. I feel there are things that that her taking actions like these do achieve certain things that can have net benefits, I think, in the future, both legislative and societally. For one, the very fact that we have this now gigantic interconnected internet of public opinion around on everything, you do get an idea of where sentiment is at between what people say or think about what she's done. And then that can influence various different kinds of things, from polling to what other parties or peoples or voter bases want their elected officials to do, or what those elected officials see as what people actually care about. And it all...
Social media is kind of a mirror, not it's I don't know if it's necessarily the best indicator of
maybe not the best indicator, but it's just a method of it. And I don't know, it's data. How you interpret that data is a different other way.
I know how I feel as someone who's on her end of the political spectrum, seeing that makes me feel frustrated. And it's
you're
like,
probably here, and she's probably.
I'd describe myself as center left, right? But if I'm on your end of the political spectrum and I'm feeling, I don't want to say like alienated, but like if I'm looking at what you're doing and sort of going, that's not great for us. Like I guarantee you that people in the center and people on the right, you're not winning any of them over by doing what it is you're doing. Like I don't see how that advances your agenda.
Time will tell. It's one of those things where you don't know. Like as Tom said, in the future, if this happens again, and we repeat submissions, so to speak,
we'll have a Lidia Thorpe memorial speed bump on on George Street.
And I just think
for the great work she did.
It also matters just challenging that sort of stuff. Like the police's presence in Pride, the Liberals have a float in Mardi Gras that gets booed relentlessly, and I think that's important.
It goes on
but should they be allowed to do that? I don't think they shouldn't be allowed to do that, because there are gays that are liberal, and people should know and see that and see themselves identified. Yes, I'm a conservative, but I'm also a gay person, right? So I can be part of both of those groups. My identity is valid.
Sure,
like, I think that's part of the whole thing of Pride.
Part of the party that was trying to drag their entire questions of their existence through the mud for many, many years.
Yeah, but do they just get written off forever?
I think, sure. Like, you don't get to be in Pride till you've shown actionable change on your attitudes to this.
I think that's a very exclusionary attitude. I just don't think that's right.
The thing is, like, Pride, I don't know who organises the Mardi Gras. So, and I'm assuming there is an economic.
There's a body somewhere. Let's not even get started at the economic discussions around Pride.
There's been lots of discussions around like brand sponsorships for Pride and like, do they belong? And when they've sponsored the Conservative Party.
Maybe that's a
pink
larger
dollar
question.
Is the one chasing the pink dollar, I believe is the expression.
And maybe that's a larger question, right? Around like what is actual inclusion and what is just showing like. Tokenistic support.
10,000% what the police are doing.
And I remember when I was there at Pride in Seattle in 2017, and there was a lot of corporate sponsorship and so pink washing, I suppose you might call it. Brands trying to associate themselves with Pride by sponsoring floats, and clearly there's like a commercial interest there. But also like. I'm also kind of the opinion, it's like, well, if big major brands want to go out there publicly and spruik gayness as a thing that they're okay with, like, surely that's got to be good for society. Like, the more you see gay characters in film and culture, and like the more the idea of LGBTQ is just like a normal, accepted, everyday thing, I think people see that and they recognize that and they go, okay, Nike's got a, transgender model. Okay, like it doesn't seem like that would be anything, but I think that does help to move the discussion. And yes, there is a corporate benefit to them doing that, but I think there is a net benefit to society in us seeing more queer representation in everyday life.
100%.
Even if someone makes $1 on it.
It needs to also be met with consistent behavior. And that's the main issue that everyone discusses around like pink washing and brands and all that sort of stuff, is they all change their icons for Pride Month in the States, and then they go right back to doing all their discriminatory bullshit the moment that the month ends. And I saw a fantastic point by the games commentator Stephanie Sterling, who's a non-binary person, talking about the new Harry Potter game that's been out and around, and it's connections to J.K. Rowling and J.K. Rowling's desire for all trans people to cease existing, and pointing out, like Stephanie said, I'm gonna remember all these storefronts promoting the Harry Potter game so much with all this controversy around when they swapped their logos to be rainbows in June. You say you're all for like LGBT people, and yet LGBT people are saying like, hey, this game will financially support someone who's calling for our eradication.
It's hard
Look
to
at all those
be
places that took
ethically
sponsorship.
consistent and economically successful.
Yeah, so yeah,
100%.
here's
and
the
the
thing,
whole thing
though.
of ethical consumption under capitalism is almost impossible.
Yes,
but
that was
that's
the point
kind of
I was
thing
about to
they're
make.
talking about. They're like, fucking PlayStation and Xbox and stuff can flick their logos over to rainbows for a month, but then they're like splashed all over the screen, the Harry Potter game, that from the world of the person who's been championing some crazy fascist shit.
Well, there's
That being said,
Yeah.
my brother has played the game and reckons it's quite good. But the thing,
I've heard it's
choose your own
good.
adventure.
I see very much how it is a problematic thing.
Here's
So,
the thing,
yeah.
though. In the show The Good Place, they sort of touch on this point, like basically what you said, Tom. Like living ethically is almost impossible when you consider long supply chain. Yeah, so
Yeah.
to give you a very very brief sort of overview of what's happened is they realize no one's going to heaven. They go, why? What's happening? They find the situation where everyone's being graded on this point system. But everything is now being like the full sort of like modern supply chain is now being considered when someone ends up going to heaven or hell. It's like, oh well, yes, you have the cow's milk because that is causing climate change, but you had almond milk instead, and almond uses way more water than. Oh no, that's actually a point against you. It's like, yeah, if you dive deeply enough into any supply chain, into any business, you're going to find non-ethical, problematic behaviors. I don't.
Exploitative.
Because capitalism, as it currently stands, as it's currently formulated, is more or less exploitative of someone or something at all times. It is impossible to live a fully ethical life under those constraints. If that's what you're measuring, like I don't know about the supply chain of my fucking Adidas shoes. I don't know about the supply chain. Like I know if there's it's probably not good.
Yeah, but that's why I feel there are those behaviors where you can correlate the two things together that you don't have to dig that deep to see. And I'd argue that's one of them. Like the very fact we are having this discussion on probably multiple devices that were put together by orphans,
tiny little slave
from,
hands,
like blood mines,
yes,
and all that sort of stuff.
Using cobalt from slave mines in Africa. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, all these discussions around ethical consumption and being better people, all that's using technology built on the back of a lot of suffering. Yeah, that's an irony not lost on me.
But I need an iPhone because we live in the 21st century.
Yeah,
so
and all that sort of stuff. But I think you can also see, though, if I was like, we should all be consuming things better and like being all better and great and awesome and whatever, and then also I take a huge donation from big oil spill, then you can be like, no, Tom, that's something you are actually responsible for. Like that doesn't come under, it's impossible to be ethical under capitalism. That's Tom, you made a considered choice to be saying one thing and then also doing the thing that harms the thing that you are saying about in another. And I think that's what people
But also, like, don't you want, if we're talking about all of this in the context of like accepting donations for Pride, these organizations that organize Pride festivals, don't you want there to be a Pride festival? Like, isn't it important that it is economically viable and that there is a Pride festival every year? Isn't that better? Even if they take money from Woodside,
10,000%.
which you go, that's probably not good, for example. Isn't it better that there is a Pride festival than there isn't a Pride festival, even if it means they had to take some dodgy money? Like,
I'm sure the Pride organizers grapple when I say the Pride, like Mardi Gras, Pride marches in Melbourne, wherever. I'm sure this is something that those organizations grapple with, like all the time. And it's not an easy question. And I'm sure that the organizers, when they see like this, they probably sweat pretty heavily because they go, and they will check themselves to a certain extent, probably.
Yeah. But I think it's the thing of not so much saying, oi, Pride, stop taking money from sponsorship. It's more, hey, sponsors of Pride, if you're going to fucking sponsor Pride, don't do anti-LGBTQI plus shit for the rest of the year. Like, where you are conscious of the fact that you're doing it.
Needs to be an actual behavioral policy thing that's not just a token support.
Corporate social responsibility is hard. It's really, really hard. This is something,
it's super hard,
ethics in supply chains and this sort of stuff. That's something we studied during the MBA. It's really, really difficult. MBA. It's really, really difficult to do it well because of all the things that we mentioned earlier. It's and corporate social responsibility can fall under so many different kinds of umbrellas. There's all these different frameworks like creating shared value or CSV as opposed to, environmental and social governance. And like there's, depending on what you prioritize, are you prioritizing the climate? Are you prioritizing ethics in your supply chains? Are you prioritizing like, stamping down on misogyny in the workplace? Are you prioritizing, like there's a million different very worthy causes that you could prioritize. And some of them make the company money and some of them definitely don't, and cost money and are cost centers. And that's all well and good if the company's making a lot of money, but if the company's losing money, all of a sudden that's not so good. So I don't know that it's up to our corporate overlords to dictate to us our morality. I don't know that that's necessary. I think that is a way of much frustration, is to just hope and assume that corporate entities are going to prove to be ethical because of who they sponsor.
But it's more that we should expect it of them.
We should expect it out of all of them, regardless of who they sponsor. We should expect it out of all companies.
Yeah, it's a difference between, it's not a matter of, of course they're going to do that because capitalism is bad. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be constantly expecting better.
Yeah, we should.
And we should be asking for better.
Which is that what Lidia Thorpe is doing? But to bring it back around.
I was just going to say, and we ended on such a positive collaborative note where we were all working together to push the common good forward. And then you brought up Lidia Thorpe again, and now we've got to go for another 15 minutes.
No, we're not. We're going to wrap it up. But the thought bubble is what she does that help stimulate the conversation that we just had? So put that in your brain.
Literally did, because we wouldn't have had this conversation without.
It's a good point. There you go.
It stimulated the conversation where I started yelling at Tom, so I don't know how he feels.
I want you guys to just apologize to each other. Oh, no, probably not George. George was yelling at Tom, to be fair. So George, just calm down.
What?
Just say your piece and just like shake hands. Like you can't. There's a computer screen.
We can't really shake hands. So
just what are you doing? You're making this weird.
I am making it weird, aren't I?
You are making it so weird.
On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com, which, as far as we're aware, has not been involved in any supply chain, modern slavery, or war crimes. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist, which definitely have been involved in some war crimes, at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and motherfucking TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and Twitter at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
You can follow me down to the next parade of choice, where I will be protesting about a yet to be defined issue.
Next one in the calendar is let me just have a look here. It's a white pride rally.
Shit.
Charlottesville.
Wait, no, I could protest at the white pride rally against white pride.
You could protest the white pride. Yeah, there you go. Oh, we saved it. Thanks for listening, guys. I love your faces. We'll see you next week.
Just want everyone to be happy, you know?
It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, you know. It's easy for us to be happy. We're not marginalized.
No.